In this episode, I spoke with Martin. Martin and I have spoken a few times now. Martin is author of Children of the Dying Hearth. And it's an episode of putting the world to rights. And occasionally we remember to talk about the trilogy of his books. I love talking to Martin. I hope you enjoy it too. Hello, welcome to the David Watson podcast again. Good to talk to you as always. It's been a hell of a time.
Yeah. I was just telling you before we got on, daughter's still going through some health issues. And we're just saying that's kind of life.
It is though, isn't it? That's the hard thing.
Yeah, we mentioned briefly the Stoics, and I just brought up for a second. I mean, as an aspiring author who's this summer, actually, I was able to finish the rough draft of my third book. So I'm trying to crank those out and go through them. I'm really enjoying the process of that. The process of the health complications with my daughter, I'm not enjoying so much, but that's also kind of the hero's journey in a way. I said Bilbo didn't really enjoy facing smog.
No,
right? It's never fun for the main characters as they're going through the thick of it, but it's what makes for the growth and the journey.
Because that's the whole thing about Bilbo, isn't it? He just doesn't want the ring. Mm-hmm. He doesn't want the burden of having to be the one that does it. And it's the irony that it's because he doesn't want the burden, which is why he was chosen.
Yeah,
because everyone else, in theory, could be corrupted.
Yeah, with Frodo kind of saying, I guess I'll do it because everyone else is just squabbling over it. It's really, I feel like you pick any classic book in Western literature and you're going to find either the reluctant hero or the kind of fallen villain who chooses the responsibility because he thinks he can handle it.
Yeah.
And then they kind of to fall from grace, which is, I guess, the the burden of responsibility. Do you rise up and take it or not?
Because they cover that. It's really daft but one of my favourite scenes is at the first Marvel 4, because he's lost all his powers, and and the robot thing comes up, and he talks to Loki through the robot, saying, "Look, just basically, I can't do anything to stop you, but don't touch these people. Just take my life, and it's fine." And in doing so, without inadvertently gets his power restored to him. But it's that kind of, he had it all, lost it all, and then was like, do you know what? It doesn't matter. I'm still going to stand up for these people because it's the right thing to do, and it was nothing more than that.
Yeah,
and it's weird how things like that play out in our lives, and we don't even see it.
Yeah, and I think as a teacher especially, the weird thing for me is seeing the inverse play out, where someone has that opportunity and they don't rise to meet it. And then they kind of wonder, either out loud or just through actions later on of, well, why am I not being the one that's looked at for this? It's like, the door was open for you.
Yeah.
You just didn't walk through it. And it is tough. I mean, in the movie, he stands before that robot that's ready to obliterate him.
Yeah.
And that's not going to be an easy thing to do. But I mean, I think of my students, of a 15-year-old who are they going to be the first one to sign up for that group presentation? Like, I'll go first.
Yeah.
That's a tough thing to do at a new school as a 15-year-old, first time in class meeting people. You don't know anyone. You're nervous, but that rising to the occasion, that might get the girl's attention. That might get the the teacher's attention later on of like, wow, this person really jumped at the opportunity. I'm going to recommend them for this opportunity. And it's instead it's neat as a teacher seeing the students then kind of which ones shy away and say, I don't want that.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, well, then you'll never be Thor.
And that's because it reminded me when I was probably I'd only been about 20, and I used to work for like Volvo and stuff like that, and they send you on these training courses and stuff, and you'd be in this room, and I'd typically for a long time I was the youngest guy in the room, and they'd be like, okay, who wants to stand up, introduce themselves and say who they are, and everyone would go silent. I'd just like, yeah, I'll do it. And everyone's like, I don't know how you can stand up, and all it was nothing other than this logic in my head is, well, you've got to do it, so I may as well just go first. Everyone has to do it.
Yeah,
I may as well just go first. Literally just get it out of the way.
I had that mindset in grad school.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like none of the grad students, like, we don't know what we're doing. Like, we all have our own respective interests and everything, but all right, who's going to present first on a topic? It's like, well, I'll go first because then I don't really have anything to base it on if I bomb.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know any better. Like, this is just my best effort. This is what you're telling me to do. I'm going to try it. And then I can be the feedback for everyone.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, because that's it. I just kind of learned that if you just put yourself in front, you set a baseline, and everyone remembers the guy that goes first, and everyone remembers the person that goes last. And the only people that get remembered between that is if somebody says something exceptionally funny or exceptionally stupid.
Yeah.
and you just, and
you can cancel that out if you do both at the start.
Yeah. And that's the thing is it's interesting. I was with public speaking, well, just like, kids at school and stuff. That thing that they really want is just on the other side of volunteering, but they think it's not. That they're just like no. If you step forward and say, yeah, I'll do that class, or I'll do that activity, I'll do everything you actually desire and the way that you want to be perceived is on the other side of that activity. And I remember I was just talking about this at a friend's wedding a couple of weekends ago. I was in Austria for a friend's wedding, and I was one of my friends there. Actually, he's I mean, we're friends now, but he's one of my closest friends' dad. And him and I were talking about like one of the big differences between his career and my career, especially when I was younger, is I thought it was okay to clown around in my early days at work. And it's only when you get much, much older you realise that people just consider you difficult to work with. And you can, when I was younger, I could never understand why the really boring person and everything was getting all the good work and getting the promotions. And it's just like, because everyone thinks you're a dickhead, And he was saying that he was lucky because he just happened to be on this apprenticeship, and he's seen one of his mates just do something, clown around for a laugh, and just happened to catch how the boss was really pissed off about it when everyone else thought it was hilarious. So he just didn't want to cop any trouble, just kept his head down. Next thing, within a few weeks, his mate is just not getting anything from the boss, and he's getting all of this work and all of this stuff. And 6 months, 12 months down the line, he ends up passing his apprenticeship, getting his promotion, and he realised it's just like, people, they're not interested in you being funny. They're not interested in you. It's just get your head down and don't embarrass the boss. It's not funny to make a joke about him in front of 20 people. They don't like it, and it will actually end that career for you. And he said that this friend of his that it happened to never really got past basically being a technician, whereas my friend Keith went on right up to sort of managing director level, general manager levels. It's a big firms, all because he just seen someone else's mistake.
And that's what's the quote is I'm blanking on it now, but it's essentially, it ends with wisdom is learning from other people's mistakes.
Yeah.
And that's the real key. Like it's the the students I have, the friends I have who are perceptive enough to see other people and what they do well and what they do incorrectly, or those kind of mess ups of, yeah, maybe don't be ripping on the boss at work because I'm not saying, kiss the boot or anything,
No, but that's
but
it. You don't have to.
if
Just
if
keep
you're
your.
trying to, yeah, if you're trying to get ahead, like don't bite the hand that feeds.
Mm.
Um, and there's a fantastic uh, old miniseries, I Claudius, that I showed to my Latin 4 students. Tracks the Julio-Claudian emperors, and Claudius is club-footed, has a stammer, and just almost thrown out to the dogs, literally, when he's born because he's this weak, uh, gimpy little baby. And he learns early on in his life because essentially the Empress Livia is killing off people that are in the way of her son succeeding. He realizes if I just keep my head down and kind of do my thing, I'll get ahead just fine.
Mm.
I'll survive what's going on. Um, and it's a kind of weird lesson to be teaching 17-year-olds because I feel like from every angle, especially from education, they're being bombarded with go out and make a difference.
Mm.
And it's the prime demographic that Marx called the useful idiots
Yeah,
because every one of them thinks they know the world to a T, but they have no worldly experience. And so they want to go out and change everything. And I'm sitting there kind of pumping the brakes on them and say, just hold up a bit.
yeah.
Really like slow down and get your bearings first. I mean, it's the tall grass that gets cut.
It is. Mm. And
So be aware.
because I kicked back on this a lot when I even wrote, when I used to write blogs, I wrote a blog on it about everybody wants a good leader. And I'm just like, no, most people want a solid boss. This idea that, like leaders can inspire. Yeah, that's great in the tech world. That's great in the creative world. And I think the example I wrote about was that if you're in one of these big high-rise tech offices and you've got a great leader who's inspiring you through the next project to be creative, trust you, and you feel empowered and you feel like you're achieving something, that's fine until the shit pipe at the bottom of the building explodes and the maintenance guys who do that sort of work turn up and they have to get the contractors in because it's a main pipe burst. Trust me, those guys are working a 40 to 50 hour week. They're not inspired. They're covered in shit. And they don't need a leader to inspire them. They need a boss that knows how to crack the whip and fire them if they don't work properly. That same boss is also the one that rips the arse out of HR if his guys don't get paid on time or you take the piss out of them. There's nothing to do with leadership. Yeah. Leadership is what you do in the world of inspiration. In the world of digging trenches, you need good ranch hands. Who, do you know what I mean? Who you need like a Rip from Yellowstone who knows how to handle people in shit environments, like literally in shit environments. So pick what you aspire to be.
I cannot think of any general labor job where I would want an inspiring leader.
There's nothing inspiring about
I
it.
did. Yeah, I ripped up the carpet and did the floors in this room and the nursery, and just laid down laminate basically, and did it myself with my dad. And I never done it before, but I could not imagine if I was doing this for a living, it'd be a kind of practical, somewhat menial, boring job. But if it pays the bills, okay, cool. I could not imagine sitting there every day in the morning with a 10-minute meeting of some inspirational, once more under the breach, good fellow. Like, what the hell? Like, no, let me get to work.
Yeah. That's
Calm down, King Henry, and let me just lay some floorboards.
Yeah.
And then go on my lunch break.
There's builders, like contractors and builders that get paid by the job. They don't need a pep talk. Their pep talk
No.
is at the end of every month when they see the dollars in their
Yeah.
bank account. That's
Yeah.
their motivation. That's their inspiration.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
like you
Get
say,
it done.
want to
Do it
small
right.
into the
And if we
brute.
have to be back, it's going to cost us more, and it's coming out of your paycheck.
Yeah, yeah, it's very inspiring.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is it. There's this whole thing about getting people to be leaders, and the other reason, like you say, go out and solve the world's problems. It's that Jordan Peterson quote. Go and make your own bed first.
Yeah.
Just literally, if
Yeah.
you can't sort out your own bed, what makes you think you can sort out the world's problems?
Yeah. Yeah. He has so many good references with that, just because it really is. I see it all the time, and at the same time, I do want to clarify. I'm not trying to diminish anyone's dreams here.
No.
I'm not saying we have kids who start up fundraising programs for the needy who help out at soup kitchens. It's like go and help out. Absolutely. Go, if you want to do a startup with a business or a tech thing, go try it. Absolutely. But if you want to get into the very swampy world of leadership and of politics, make sure your own house is in order,
Yeah.
right? The old phrase, don't throw stones in a glass house. It blows my mind the number of people who want to try and solve the world's problems and can't solve their own basic issues.
Yeah. It is, and it's that promotion of you should go out there, you should be striving to do this, you should be striving to do that. It's just even adults, they don't know how they feel about themselves, and the problem as well is when it's not a deep rooted desire because you either want to give back to the community or you see a sense of injustice that you want to correct, you end up going into things with the wrong motivations and the wrong with good intentions, but with the wrong motivations. And ultimately, even if you get the kind of alleged desired result, you end up feeling shallow because it hasn't fixed what it was you was hoping it would fix. Because because you're doing it because somebody's told you. I mean, I think it was probably one of the hardest things I learned as an adult is to follow your own passion.
Yeah, and you mentioned intentions there for a bit. It's a timeless quote again of the path to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yeah.
There's something I get into in my ethics classes. There is not a single genocidal leader of the 20th century that did not do what they did because they had what they believed were good intentions. Whether it's Stalin wanting to make the USSR a equitable place, whether it's Pol Pot doing the same in Cambodia, whether it's Hitler doing I want the German people to be strong in German. Every single one of them said, this is what I believe is right. And so they have a good intention behind it. And it led to millions of people dying.
Well, because
going out with good intentions isn't enough.
Well, I've often upset people with that Hitler line. Hitler didn't think he was evil. Hitler thought he was doing a good thing. Hitler, in his eyes, thought he was saving a country, saving the world. He thought his country under his leadership was going to be a shining example of how the world could be better. He considered himself up there with Jesus in terms of his godly goodness. There was nothing about him that he thought was bad or evil at all. But but he was, evil is in the eye of the beholder.
And I think that's one of the it's one of the, I guess, positive things about kind of the postmodern thing of what is evil?
Yeah.
Is there an objective evil? Is there an objective good? And I think the recognition that these leaders who committed these atrocities, they believe themselves to be good. And I think that is the ultimate historical lesson, that if they thought they were doing good and you think you are doing good, it's a further example that within you is the capacity to be them. Yeah. So you better be fucking careful
but
for lack of a better term. But it's the seriousness of it. And this is one of the things that I love about history and trying to convey this to the students is the study of history is a study of you.
yeah,
Everything you can or will do has been tried. So figure out which character you want to be.
yeah. I think that's
And
probably
that's it.
the good lesson of history, isn't it? And perhaps the problem with the kind of the media outlook on the world at the moment, for want of a better term, is that they're all acting as though the world is in a terrible place when it's in the best place it's ever been in. And they're not reflecting an honesty about history, like what it was like then, how hard it was. Healthcare's never been better. Crime has never been down to. People in the first world, especially, have never lived such an amazing, profitable, safe life. And the way they act, it's like you would think we're caught up in the Middle Ages with a raging war and a bubonic plague. It took me a while to get the words out. Yeah, and it's like far from it. It's the best time ever in history to have lived so far.
Yeah. There's the common rebuttal is, well, the wealth gap is so big. It's bigger than it was during the French Revolution, but it doesn't take into account, well, the bottom tier of that wealth gap is doing better than the top tier of the French Revolution. So even the bottom tier of society, which has their struggles, absolutely. There's so many social programs and there's so many organizations that can provide housing and healthcare and food, all these things that, I mean, childcare, all these things are on the table that 100 years ago, tough luck.
I was talking to a lady on this podcast several months ago now, and she'd written a kind of fictional account inspired by her grandmother, and her grandmother was a child in the Great Depression, and at 13 her parents were just like, look, the bottom line is we can't afford to feed you anymore because we can't afford to feed anyone, and the neighbouring farmer needs a wife, you're his wife. And she was 13, and I think, I can't remember how old he was, I think he was in his 20s, but there was no horror about that. There was no, this is madness, no, this is crazy. It was, you have effectively gone through puberty, you are now a young lady, 13 has nothing to do with it, and we are starving and you're one mouth we can't feed, and somebody has said they can feed you. It wasn't no love, no Disney, no poetry. Do you know what I mean? There was nothing. It was, I mean, and sadly, unfortunately for her, several years later, because of his drinking and stuff, she ended up having to leave. And she literally was like in Louisiana or something, and walked to New York. Took about a month. And was just wearing, because you learn all of these things when you know by doing these podcasts. That corn sacks and wheat sacks and all that used to come in different colours because the people were so poor they used to turn them into clothes. And that's what she had. She just had a dress. That was the only thing she owned, was a dress made out of these old corn sacks, these flour sacks and stuff. And you just like,
and I mean that was the norm of the world for thousands of years. It still is, sadly, the norm in some places in the world. I just read a thing about a man in Afghanistan who had to do that with one of his daughters. That basically he owed, I think, the Taliban like $1,000 essentially. And he's like, well, I can't pay it, so here's my very young daughter.
Yeah.
And I believe the daughter was sold basically into marriage to a man in his 50s.
Yeah. And that's not considered a problem over there. It's normal. It's no. Absolutely fine. You owed a debt. Okay, I'll take your daughter.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Again, the useful idiots line I used earlier. People want to make out like the U.S. is going to become the next Margaret Atwood novel of Handmaid's Tale, and it's like that's happening right now. But it's happening in a place that you seemingly don't care about. So, like,
I tell you, when I look at US politics and I look at British politics, I am like, I I don't know what to say. We just had a thing in
well,
the UK where a 60-year-old man has been sentenced and is imprisoned for 18 months for something he wrote on Facebook,
yeah,
and a person who's not from the UK has avoided a prison sentence for raping an underage girl.
yeah, I saw that.
And I'm just like literally make this make sense.
Yeah, and it was the reason was because the individual did not understand it was wrong, if I remember right, because
Yeah,
it's a different culture.
yeah.
Um,
And
and
that's
I'm not trying to send you to prison, but I'm happy to talk about all that
would
because you're the one over there.
well, yeah, but this is it. It's just my thing with all of these are I reference something that I just refer to because I like the visualization is I call it the pendulum swing.
Mhm.
And the point I say to people who especially people who are younger than me is the pendulum always swings back, and what you have to try and figure out is where the pendulum is at the moment. And if it hasn't started swinging back yet, we're in a lot more trouble than you think we are. And they're like, no, it'll be fine. I said, no, because it will swing back further right than it has swung left. And if it hasn't started, because people are already kicking back massively, but nobody has got parliamentary power yet. And when it does swing back, you've got to be careful because the extreme on the right are just as bad as the extreme on the left. There is nothing pleasant about either side, and it's the people in the centre that are always caught in the crossfire. And I say to people, like, if that pendulum is already swinging back, okay, we might get off lightly. But if it hasn't, and I reference Uganda, I think it's Uganda, made homosexuality illegal, and how many African countries are starting to follow. So don't think that we won't do the same. Don't think.
Yeah, there's nothing solidified in history.
No.
Things can always change. And I think with the pendulum, another question to ask is how bloody will it be? You said like, well, there's no parliamentary power pushing it back yet. If there isn't, then it will be pushed back through the sword, essentially.
Yeah.
And that's the thing where, again, the people in the middle are often caught. I already saw some pushback happening in Ireland, I believe.
Yeah.
And it's
well, we've had some pushback in terms of the UK riots, where they just started burning down a hotel with migrants in it, and nobody's condoning it. But 10 years ago, there would have been public outrage, not media outrage.
I think that's one of the interesting lessons from the Nazis is it's not the 3% that can move the needle and cause the revolutions and everything. It's the silent majority of like, what are they actually believing?
Oh yeah,
that are like, I'm actually okay with this. I'm afraid to say I'm okay with this, but it's fine. One
of the things I noticed, and I noticed on Facebook, is my mum is 72, 71 or 72. She's over 70 because we did her birthday. I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, because I'm a good son like that. And but I arranged the birthday, so I am a good son like that, right? But I think she's actually 72 in September. I've noticed her for the first time ever in my life, and her friends who are all pensioners, 60s, 70s, 80s, sharing political posts against the government. And I saw that for the first time, and I was just like, that's not a good sign. That's not positive, because when grandparents are getting angry at politicians and using social media to express their anger.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I don't feel the pendulum has swung back yet. It's not good.
It's when a government stops representing its people, bad things happen.
Yeah.
That's regardless of government. I mean, it could be a monarchy. If a monarchy doesn't express the interests of the people, I mean, this happened throughout the Roman Empire all the time. Of the emperors just total debauchery in the palace, get rid of them.
Yeah.
It could be a republic. It could be a democracy. If it's not, and this should be qualified. It's not the. I'm not arguing for a tyranny of the majority by any sense, but it needs to adequately reflect the general sentiment of the people governing. And if it's not, then you get the septuagenarian who's saying, like, I don't recognize my parliament.
Yeah, and that's
just very strange.
So I don't know if you're aware, one of the things that the Prime Minister did was he cut what we call fuel benefits. Pensioners get winter fuel benefits. They get tax reductions or get tax credits. Cut them because he said we can't afford them. And that's what I mean. And at the same time, allowed a lot more people into the country again. At the same time, said they need to be immediately housed as a priority over the existing people. As you're aware, I'm choosing my words very careful. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And choosing my words very careful for the YouTube algorithm.
Yeah. Well, I mean, less the YouTube algorithm, more the government don't want to go to jail.
Well, he's just pushed. He's raising it in Parliament, or it's being raised as a bill, because they are going to make misogyny illegal.
That's rather subjective.
Yeah, and it's being put forward under the Terrorism Act.
That's going to be interesting when paired with the group that's coming in.
Well, it's how are you going to define it? And I'll just double check exactly what it is that he's going to do.
Yeah, because that's one of the things that I get into with that ethics class I teach is we have to be so careful with our definitions. And I'll get kids throwing around the word genocide, and it's like, what you're talking about is not a genocide in any sense of the word. They'll bring up things it's like, this is affront to my rights. It's like, well, what rights are actually being stepped on? And so for your point with misogyny, how are you even defining that?
Yes.
Is it any ruling against a woman? Because that's going to be...
No, they're doing it under... So this is from the BBC 2 days ago on 18th of August. Misogyny to be treated as extremism by the UK government. Extreme misogyny will be treated as a form of extremism under new government plans, the Home Office has said. Yvette Cooper, who's the Home Secretary, has ordered a review of the UK's counter-extremism strategy to determine how best to tackle threats posed by harmful ideologies. And it's to do with, apparently, there was a rise of extremism in both online and on the streets that phrase the very fabric of our communities and our democracy. And it is to look at the rise of the far-right extremism, as well as the wider ideological trends, including extreme misogyny or beliefs, which fit into broader categories such as violence. But the thing that I find very strange about this, like, one, there's no way to police it without over-policing it, if you do what I mean, where you're going to end up literally in prison because you said something like, "God, you stupid bitch." Well, that's misogynist. Right. Oh, right. Well, I'm now being charged for extremism. But it goes counter because one of the things that we're having big issues is with the Islamophobia, but
Hmm.
they they follow Sharia law,
Hmm.
which is
Yeah,
it's
which is extremely misogynistic. Which that's where that this is it's an odd thing then for is it Labor that's putting this forward?
yeah, yeah. Keir Starmer is the Prime Minister.
Huh.
Yvette Cooper is the Home
How
Secretary.
odd.
Well, it turns
What?
out he was quite the. Turns out he is incredibly left wing, like more left wing than Marxism. When you
Hmm.
look at his history of organisations he joined and clubs he was a member of and stuff like that, it turns out he was
Yeah.
right up there with them. So,
Yeah, that's not something you want.
no,
um, yeah, that's there's I think I just saw a thing this morning. Is it Sadiq Khan said
yeah,
he's afraid for him and his family's life if Trump gets elected,
yeah,
which I thought was so odd. Of it's
yeah.
if it's a U.S. president, what? How are
This
you
is
afraid of this?
this is weird. I mean,
There's a weird fear mongering that right now I feel like the left is doing uh, so hyperbolically
yeah,
that it's for anyone outside of the left, it feels comical almost of like, how can you actually believe this?
yeah,
But I think it makes a good kind of case study in the how captured ideologically a lot of people are.
yeah.
Got my cat
It's
crawling over me. This is all right. He keeps crawling underneath and on
no,
top of me, so
it's all good.
he's a little needy. But
What's your cat's name?
this little guy's name is Cupid because he is very affectionate and he will
Nice.
not leave me alone. So there he is.
Hello, Cupid.
Ended up actually saving his life because he had a life-ending illness with an
Oh,
experimental drug. I injected him for over 100 days
Jesus.
and gave him pills for about another 80. And now he's healthy and happy and annoying. But he's always purring, always happy. So
Oh, nice, nice.
affectionately named Cupid. But he helps me forget the problems of the world.
Yes, that's what my dog does.
So yeah. So I'm sure when you're reading the latest news of Starmer, it's here comes Fido, and
Well,
things seem a little less terrible.
yeah. Well, that's fit. You know, when I'm walking the dog at 5 o'clock in the morning, you know, and picking up a dog shit with my little plastic bag, you know,
Yeah.
and because funnily enough, you can't buy plastic bags in supermarkets because we're fighting climate change, but we can still use them to pick up organic waste matter from animals to put in a bin.
Yeah. There's a lot of what was it the like Starbucks? They had the paper straws
Yeah.
that came in a plastic container. It's like
I,
how is this changing anything?
it's just yeah. It's yeah, it's just that's when the world you know like when everyone says I can't use plastic and Amazon can't send a matchbox
Yeah.
in a small box. It comes wrapped in
Yeah.
20 different boxes and plastics.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it does go back to that point before my cat interrupted of how captured I
Yeah.
feel like people are ideologically. It's really, really scary, especially as a student of history, of saying like, well, what happens when people are so ingrained in an idea and they don't push back on it at all? Um, it's he's knocking stuff over. It's the worst atrocities in history have been committed by not by Hitler, not by Stalin, but
No.
by the groups of people that followed them
Yeah.
so blindly. And that's the thing that I think will get me in trouble with some people. You said people push back on your comment of like Hitler believed what he was doing was right. And absolutely, I don't think there's any disputing that. But it's again, he wasn't the one filling the gas chambers.
No,
It was
he wasn't.
the people that followed him. And that's, I mean, without them, he's just the village idiot shouting with a sign on the street corner about how the Jews are terrible. And
And that's
that's the guy you ignore.
yeah, and that's all he was. Is people don't understand
Yeah.
is he was just the guy that when he started to rise to fame and power, and he had his platform, it just enabled a certain psyche of people to jump on a bandwagon.
Mm.
And they had the, for want of a better term, the tenacity and the desire to go further. And that's why I say people, and I talk to people about the pendulum swing,
Oh,
is
yeah.
because the people that are being called far right at the moment were once upon a time would have been called left of centre.
Oh, yeah.
You haven't seen the far right yet. The far right
Yeah.
is just sitting at home right now, cracking open another can of beer, waiting for its turn.
Yeah. That's I keep seeing the kind of depiction of the stick figures and someone running really far left.
Yeah.
And they say, "You're far right." It's like, I haven't moved.
No.
I feel like I'm still in the middle here. And I mean, me saying I want to keep as much money as I make with my paycheck as possible. Like, yeah, I think some social programs are great, but I don't want to be taxed 60%,
No.
40%. Like this, and for what? Which then it gets at your mom's Facebook posts or the retiree, the pensioner's
Yeah. Yeah.
Facebook posts of how come my fuel is getting cut and we're housing someone
Yeah.
who is brand new, who doesn't believe in maybe our same cultural values, who wants to put a burqa on women, who
And
would be the
bearing in
the
mind,
misogyny bit.
these women are well, these pensioners, male and female, are the same people that do the spring fetes, the summer fairs, the Women's Institute, and are always raising money for local charities.
Yeah. Yeah.
These are the people with grandchildren. These are the people that go
Yeah.
to church. These are these are the people that are always doing the local fundraisers. They're the ones
Yeah.
that are always volunteering because they're retired and they feel that they owe their community something. And now they're the ones sharing what would be labelled as far right extremism. And you're like, no, these are actually the cream tea brigade.
Yeah.
They love nothing more than
I mean,
a little trip down to the coast. We'll have cream tea and jam.
Yeah.
It's scones.
I mean,
It's just like, no, they're not. They're
I
not
was
far right.
yeah, I was driving through a rather affluent part of my town, and I saw a few political signs for organizations that I think it's funny that they had signs up for essentially a group that chants "Eat the Rich," and it's so strange to me, and it reminds me of Elie Wiesel's book Night
Okay.
about the Holocaust. That there's one of the Jews in the ghetto the whole time is basically saying this isn't okay. Like we're moving farther in a direction that we don't want to go in. He's blaring the alarms basically. And when the Nazis do finally come and they say, "All right, get on the train," he runs into his neighbor's house and he just says, "I told you so. I told you this was going to happen." And then he leaves.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like that, just shouting at the wind of like, why are we moving? Why do people want to move so far in a direction that you're making the pensioner who likes doing charities, who is affluent, perhaps, who wants to give back to the community, who wants to see these social programs enacted, you're making them feel far right, even though traditionally they were classic left.
Yeah.
It's
Because it's interesting because
partially depressing.
well, it's weird, isn't it? Because you had that recently with Trump and Trump getting shot, and
Yeah.
and I remember within like 12 hours that seeing the video footage of people's phones shouting, "There's somebody on the roof with a gun." There's someone on the roof with a gun, and they're filming this guy on the roof with a gun, and nobody's reacting. Like the Secret Service, nothing.
Yeah.
The police, nothing. And then you hear that people. He literally walked up with a ladder, put it up against the side of the wall, and when a police officer went to investigate, he actually pointed the gun at him, so he ducked and fell off the ladder. And nobody, and the local sheriff department was like, "No, we informed them. We put it on the radio.
Yeah.
There's somebody on the roof." And nothing happened. And the thing I find strange about that is the avenues of media that try to defend it, like, are not saying, hang on a second, I know we might not agree politically with this guy, but you're now actually shooting, or appear to be trying to take out political opponents. And and then because you then get the people like your Joe Rogan, your Patrick Davids and stuff like that, who on their podcasts used to be neutral. Like Joe Rogan was really neutral, and now him and all. I mean,
he was liberal.
Yeah, and now he's just like, no, man, you guys have messed up. Do you know what I mean? And all of these kind of like podcasts that used to just keep out of it are now like, hang on a second, you can't go around trying to shoot political opponents and pretend like nothing's happened. And they've turned on the media as well. And it's just like, it's going to be interesting to see what happens in November. Is it November?
Yeah. And that's the other thing the Democratic National Convention just ended. And the whole time they're talking about how Trump's a threat to democracy, and he's going to jail his political opponents. And it was Saul Alinsky, who wrote Rules for Radicals, said, it's like, accuse the other side of what you are doing. It's like, that's all they've been doing the last 8 years, is going after him for silly crimes that,
because I remember the one,
if you look in them, don't totally make sense. And then he almost gets shot, which they just ruled the shooter did not act alone. There's some other people involved, which I feel like anyone with some discernment could have reasoned. And they're still saying he's a threat to democracy. It's like, it's your side of the aisle that's trying to kill political opponents.
Yeah.
And it's seemingly normal left-wing individuals online who are saying, man, I wish he hadn't missed.
Yeah, Jack Black's co-star, wasn't it?
What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the weird thing. It's just like, because that's where I definitely struggle with my understanding, because that happened in Australia, wasn't it? I can't remember the guy's name, but it's Jack Black's co-star and band partner. And
Kyle Gass. Yeah.
Kyle Gass, that's it, thank you.
Yeah.
And they were just like, it's a shame he missed. You're like, dude, you're talking about a human being in a democratic country who just happens to be the opposition. You know, like when Reagan, there was the attempted assassination on Reagan, the Democrats were like, whoa, we don't do that. You know, do you know what I mean? There was no like, shame he didn't die.
Yeah.
It's just,
and it's I find it funny too, because it's the same political party and individuals that will go after Putin for the whole underwear poisoning of his political rival.
Yeah.
You know about that? Like it's really weird that it's the whole rules for thee but not for me, it seems.
It's crazy. It's like, absolutely really ridiculous how they, like you say, they adjust. Like there's nothing that they're doing that they're not accusing Putin of. And you're like, you're actually worse.
You're doing all this stuff.
There's literally now, I think, more people prosecuted in the UK for freedom of speech problems than there are in Russia. You have more freedom of speech in Russia than you do in the UK now. It's just like,
well, given the recent things of all I shared a meme online. Now I'm spending 18 months in jail. Like, and you're a free country?
No, there's definitely nothing free anymore.
Sounds
But
more like Mugabe than.
it is. It is. Do you know what I mean? We've turned
But
into one of those, and it's just like, 'cause I think it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think November will be a big one, is
yeah,
because it's very hard to read what America's going to do. But it's interesting to see the type of influencer celebrity that has turned.
yeah,
And just like, they're not necessarily out and out supporting Trump, but they're just saying, hang on, you guys, you've really messed
yeah,
up the country. I can't support you anymore.
yeah. Well, it's also. I mean, I think the U.S. needs to change a lot of their voting stuff. I mean, voter ID would be great.
Yeah.
A distinct voting day. Say this is a national holiday where everyone has no work. You can go vote. And if there's a essential service sort of thing that, well, people do need to work on this day, whether it's police, firemen, etc., um, having it be in either designated shifts or having slots available for voting. Um, there was the recent crowd strike thing that happened with all the Windows machines went down in
Yeah.
airports and whatnot. Apparently, that affected some of the voting machines, which they had been saying are not connected to the internet. So it's like, well, how do they affect them if they're not connected to the internet? Which that alone is a huge issue. I mean, there's so many different voting discrepancies that came up in the
Mm.
last election. Um, there's people that filled out affidavits all over the place that said, I saw voter fraud,
Mm.
and it wasn't taken seriously. And so I think we have a voter issue a voting issue to remedy. And that's, I think, one of the reasons as an American that I'm not sure the way this is going to go.
No, I mean,
um,
in the UK, it's interesting. In the UK, you have to have ID to vote, and you have to have. So when you go down,
yeah.
you do get sent a polling card, your electoral card. I don't think you necessarily have to have that with you, but you have to have some form of photo ID. It has to be a recognised form of photo ID, like passport, national insurance,
Hmm.
driving license, or something. And our polling is open from 7 in the morning till 10 at night,
Hmm.
so that in theory anybody can get in, has a chance to go and vote. But we have it's a funny system because Nigel Farage pretty much come second in. It's something to do with, like, he got something like, I can't remember what the percentage was of the votes across the country, and won 4 seats. And the Liberal Democrats got 40 something seats and had half of his votes.
Hmm.
So, and so because we don't have proportional representation, we have like a
Okay.
first past the post system in whatever area you are in. So whoever just
Okay.
gets the most votes, it doesn't matter. So you could be in a party that gets second everywhere in the country, and you won't get a single seat.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
Labour have one of the largest majorities of government with one of the lowest vote margins.
Yeah. It reminds me of like America's Electoral College,
Mm.
where it's we vote by states, and essentially each state's given a certain amount of electors based on demographics. And um, Oregon, for instance, the state I'm in, is pretty much all red. It's almost all right wing. Not far right
No,
by any means, but
just
I mean,
conservative
a
though,
lot of
isn't it?
Oregon, yeah, a lot of Oregon is small town. It's rural, and I mean, even the town I live in, the area has about 120,000 people, so it's not tiny
No.
necessarily, but it's not a big city by any means. Um, and it's kind of a centrist. You go
Mm.
to one side, it's a little bit more liberal, one side, it's a little bit more conservative. Um, a lot of Oregon is kind of ranching, farming territory, so you get a lot of conservative individuals. But Portland, which has a majority of the population, is liberal, and essentially all national voting that comes out of Oregon is left wing then. and you can look at a map and it's just all red, and then there's a little speck up at the top left that's blue.
It's weird, isn't it?
It's like, well, that feels weird.
It's yeah, because it's funny, isn't it? Because I mean, like right and left. I mean, once it was just really all right was conservatives. Because
Yeah,
what Republicans were just traditional conservatives. The Conservative
yeah,
Party in the UK were just traditional conservatives. They weren't right wing by any stretch by anyone's imagination. They just
yeah,
literally a degree right of the centre, and left was just a degree left of
yeah,
the centre.
yeah,
They agreed on probably 90% of the policies, which is
yeah.
you know
There's a really neat graphic I saw of the U.S. Congress, and it was basically through the years the amount of kind of cross aisle participation in bills,
Mhm.
and as time goes on, it's just less and less. There's all these connections back in like the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and it just gets less and less and less and less until now it's like one goes across, two go across, and there were two senators, I believe, that sided with the Republicans on an issue a couple years ago, and the Democrats just roasted them over the coals
yeah,
to the point where I think one of them said, "I'm an independent now because you've lost it."
yeah.
Which
But that's
just
that's
recently
that's what's
RFK
happened in the
Jr. dropped
UK.
out of the race and did the same.
Yeah, but that's what's happened in the UK. It's no longer now they do what
Yeah,
they get what's called the party whip, and you get told to follow the party whip. If you don't vote for what we tell you to vote for, you will be
yeah,
basically stood down as an MP. you know,
yeah. I mean, that sounds more like communist Russia than it does
that's it. But
a parliamentary system of the UK.
I wrote something as a comment on a YouTube video the other day, and it was just an observation that I think one of the things that's changed and is perhaps causing some of this is there is a group of people now that only know the internet and work on the internet and literally work from
Mm-hmm.
home, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
podcasters, influencers, people that have applied for a job or just remote work. Whereas once upon a time, if we say the cut-off point is 1989 or 1999, you were roughly defined by you were either white collar or blue collar. You know, do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And that is you were either some form of labour, trucking, whatever, or you were some kind of admin office type person.
Yeah,
It was kind of now we got this third thing, which is internet. People just work remotely from home. People produce stuff that like
mm-hmm.
once upon a time there was no such thing as an online shop. The internet business, the world of the internet,
Mm-hmm.
has created so much of a workforce. It's neither white collar or blue collar anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And then with
What's it?
social media influencers and stuff like that, there was no such thing once upon a time as an influencer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just like I can just, you know,
Well,
the idea that there's a possibility that at some point my podcast actually becomes commercially successful. Okay.
mm-hmm.
And I suddenly stop working for a living and just
Yeah.
carry on talking bollocks for a living. And
Yeah.
right? But it becomes successful and becomes commercially successful, which
Yeah.
then creates revenue streams. You only have to go back less than 20 years and it hadn't even become a concept that anybody had thought
Mm-hmm.
about.
Yeah. I think it's created a weird mix of the white collar and blue collar too, because you see a lot of people who are in that environment who demographically or economically would be considered white collar,
Yeah.
and yet they uh, behave as kind of a blue collar. Um, I'm gonna throw my wife under the bus for a minute. Uh, she works from home,
Yeah.
and she works in internet or network security, and she'll get online sometimes and doom scroll for a bit. And she goes, "Oh God, everything's going to shit."
Yeah.
And I was like, well, some things are, sure. But at the same time, I mean, if you look outside, there's no mobs of Antifa
No.
people storming our streets. In some cities, there are, and
Yeah.
it absolutely like that needs to be addressed. But the kind of imminent threat of all the doom and gloom you see online, like I said about my cat, you about your dog, I mean,
Yeah.
you pet the cat for a bit, you pet the dog for a bit, you're like, actually everything's
I just,
somewhat okay.
yeah, it was just, as I wrote the comment, I realised, and I think I wrote, like, one of the things I noticed more than all is, like, some of these kids have never dug a trench, never picked up a chainsaw, never picked up a
Yeah,
spanner. Because
yeah.
once upon a time, there's a generation of kids that, even if their dads worked in some form of office, they were still mowing the lawn. They were still doing an
Hmm.
oil change. They were
Yeah.
still climbing trees. And the thing I remember the most is that I think was significant is 90% of men once upon a time were actually fairly practical in and around the house, could do practical
Hmm.
tasks, could actually do practical tasks. And the the blue collar workers, like who were, yeah, construction trades, like truck drivers and stuff like that,
Hmm.
all of those things. White collar workers knew what they did, and they knew that they weren't them, but
Yeah,
they kind of understood why they weren't them.
yeah,
And the same as the blue collar guys understood why they weren't white collar,
yeah.
but they could sit down and have a beer together, and it
Hmm.
didn't matter. They could go and support the same baseball team. They could go and support the same football team,
Yeah,
basketball team. They could go out on a Saturday and support the same community events, both knowing
yeah,
that what they were not the other guy. But
yeah,
and blue collar workers would never really have that much, like, yeah, I'm pretty sure the country will do fine without you, dude. And the white collar workers were like, yeah, we make the money, but we need you, and we know we need you. But do you
yeah,
know what I mean? There was a clear, it'd almost be like a threat to your children. If you don't study hard, you'll be like so and so. Do you know what I mean? You'll be like so and so down the road. You're going to go to college. You're
yeah,
going to do this.
yeah.
Whereas, it had meaning, and anything you did came with a level of expectation. Whereas now you kind of look at a world where kids have never had to graft. And not just kids. I
Hmm.
mean, I'm talking about 20, 30-year-olds. Some of these guys are
Oh yeah.
40, they're
Hmm.
and that they've only ever influenced. Only ever, and I don't, and bear in mind, some of these people are like really smart people who've made their money in crypto and stuff like that, and or done something online, but they never ended up in an office block somewhere with a shitty boss, working on an office floor and working their way up somewhere. They just did it from home,
Hmm.
and and you just like, I think it's like created a third class of people, because there's people that still have to go to the office or do
Hmm.
some sort of trip to work in an office of some sort. There's still the blue collar, the trade type people, or the lorry drivers and delivery drivers. But then there's this
Hmm.
new class of work from home people who, there was a guy that I was following on YouTube, and he explained how he had 3 or 4 different jobs with 4 different companies, all working remotely from home, and nobody ever checked up on him, and he was picking up 4 salaries a week.
Yeah.
I mean, but the guy's a genius, because he figured out a way to sort of like
Yeah.
fake the system, because nobody's actually checking that he's on his laptop doing work 40 hours so he is working 8 hours a day,
Yeah.
but he's doing it for 4 different companies who all think he just works for them.
And I mean, even then, I think Elon highlighted this with Twitter,
Mm.
is that with tech especially, there's going to be a big culling that's going to happen of whether it's I think the pay scale will probably stay the same or rise if anything, but the workload will likely go up in the next 20 years because I think something like that's going to be more prevalent of more people will get into tech. There's going to be more individuals who understand what the job requires. There's going to be more people who just say, I can do this in 2 hours
Mm.
well, if my workday's 2 hours, I'm getting paid 200 grand to do it. I'll get three more jobs.
Yeah.
Um, and there's going to be then that pendulum swing back of someone saying, well, 2 hours, we're going to have you do more stuff, or we're going to pay you less.
Yeah.
It's kind of your choice then. But it's that kind of internet working class. There is I don't know the right term for it. But what I want to say is like a social autism,
Yeah.
because there's not a uh, I should say there are absolutely people who make their money online who put in the hours and have to deal with the BS and have
Mm.
to, really slog through things. Absolutely. Um, but in terms of like the influencer category,
Well, I mean,
come
like,
on. That's it.
I see those guys that like on Twitch, online gaming and stuff,
Hmm.
and don't get me wrong, again, they're talented because they're the best in the world at what they do. But
Some
there's
are, some aren't, some are terrible.
yeah,
So,
and there's the people that make their money just doing YouTube videos on how to get past
mhm,
levels, stuff like that. And
mhm,
it's an entire industry that's grown in the last 15 years, I guess. That just never existed once upon a time. Just
mhm.
that there was no money, there was no industry for
Yeah,
that to be a thing. But what it's done is, like I said, when I was at school, and bearing in mind for reference, I left in '92. Is when the teacher talked to you about job availability, everybody knew what the teacher was on about. They knew what the jobs were being described. Whereas now,
yeah.
kids will tell teachers, there's no career advice a teacher can now give a kid, because kids would be like, well, what about if I decided to go and do this? What if went and did that? What if I become a digital marketer and and use AI
Hmm.
tech to create slogans and stuff? And teachers are just like,
Yeah.
I have no idea what you're on about. And what I mean? And then there's literally
Yeah. Yeah.
13, 14, 15-year-olds who are sitting in their bedroom hitting up companies saying, I can do your copywriting for you.
Yeah.
And there's teachers that don't even really know what a copywriter does.
Well, I think that it's going to be interesting then to see a lot of the kind of traditional white collar businesses
Mm.
uh, remove a number of positions or requirements once they do catch up with what AI, what different technologies can do. I was already talking to a friend of mine that I think the cover letter's dead.
Yeah.
Give it 5 years, no one will want a cover letter ever again, because all you have to do is put in the prompt to AI and say, write a cover letter for this position with this job description that will likely get hired. Um, and you're good. Um, I think interviews will increase because they actually want to talk to someone to make sure, all right, are you going to, like you started the conversation, are you going to rip on the boss midway through? Are you going to be a dickhead at work?
Mm.
Or are you going to actually do your job?
I think I've seen this before, and this was at the beginning of the first lockdown. And I was watching an economist on the news, and he said, this isn't good for businesses, because they were going like, this is the start of the new wave of everybody working from home. And he was like, no, this is the start of your industry collapsing. He said, because first of all, he said, the first thing that's going to go is that we're going to let go of the office blocks. They're going to stand empty. He said, so those big companies aren't getting rent revenue anymore. He said, the cleaners that go in and clean when you're all at home and do the night shift, they've all just lost their jobs. All of those like junior admin roles that people learn about life skills and work skills, photocopying, emptying the bins, running downstairs and getting a sandwich for the boss, aren't learning just the basics of picking up a phone and answering a phone. They've all disappeared as well now. Said nobody's going to get a chance to just go and work minimum wage in an office and learn some basic office skills. Said on top of that, once you've lost the camaraderie of everybody turning up for the first 10 minutes of work, where people are standing in lifts saying hello to each other, meeting in coffee shops, standing around the coffee machine, going out for their cigarette or vape breaks or whatever. He says, you become faceless entities. He says, and then once the accountants realise they're paying you UK money with UK employment rights, UK sick rights, maternal rights, paternity rights, and pension rights, and we can hire somebody to do your job in another country for a third of the money with no rights. Why do I need to keep you? I don't even know who you are. Once upon a time, I would have met you at the coffee shop. I would have seen you at the coffee machine. You would have come into my office about something, or I'd have come to see you. I had some loyalty to you. Now you're Sandra, and you work in Reading, and we're actually based in Scotland. Well, what difference does it make if I put the company in India? Why can't I just have Sandra in India? Why can't I just have David or Martin from Africa? What difference does it make? I don't need you to be in the UK, because in the UK, if you have a job, you're entitled to a minimum of 22 days a year holiday. You're entitled to, most companies will give you up to 14 paid days sick. You're entitled to maternity leave. Every company has to give you a pension now, and you have to pay into that pension. And it's incredibly hard to fire people in the UK now, because people have so many rights. And it's just like, well, what if we just don't hire from the UK anyway, because you're all working from home from an internet connection, and we can reduce the wage bill by 2/3. And there's a good analogy I heard about the internet in general, but I think COVID and online work is reinforcing this, or starting another movement, is that it's the Wild West. And it really is I think the internet originally was kind of the push into like maybe Texas. And now we're starting to go on the Oregon Trail of people are moving in territories that we're not really sure where it's going to end up. I mean, I have discussed this in that ethics class regarding just the legal standpoint of so many things with technology. One of the things that came up, it comes with the students, because they always have this stupid thing on them, is, all right, I'm laughing. I have to have mine set to, as you and I are talking, it's set to airplane mode to make sure nothing can come through.
See, I'm not popular enough, so it just I can leave it on a ring. We're fine.
I'm like the king of memes. Do you know what I mean? I have a community of people we just send inappropriate, probably most likely arrestable memes to.
Don't let someone get in there.
I'll be deleting my phone later.
But the kids are always on their phone, and they're always sending each other stuff. And one of the discussions that's come up is, all right, you're a couple 16, 17-year-olds in a relationship, and one's pestering the other. Hey, I saw you in a bikini. I want to see that. You're sending pictures back and forth. Is that child pornography? And now, I mean, our laws have not caught up with that at all. Is the 17-year-old, 16-year-old now guilty of possession of child pornography because their significant other sent them a picture of themselves?
In the UK, you are, and you get arrested for it.
So, I mean, and that's a totally fine way to go about it. I'm not knocking that at all, but I find it interesting that we just have not caught up with that. Especially in the US. It's like we're totally lost on what to do about this.
Yeah, because there's a thing that happens every now and again. You hear about it where, like you say, some 14, 15-year-old sends her 14, 15-year-old boyfriend a topless picture or a picture of her in a,
right.
They're not, and we're not talking about, we're talking about, kids that have been together 6 months or something, they're for want of a better term, they're making out and stuff, and she's sending him a little sexy thing or whatever it is. Of course, and then somebody finds out, and the police are knocking on the doors. Like, from what I've seen, the police have been incredibly understanding, because they're like, you're 15, she's 15, but if you are basically distributing child pornography and you're not allowed, if it happens again and we find out, you will be put on the sex offenders register and you will be arrested.
Well, they're understanding, and then they scroll down and see a Keir Starmer meme, and like, oh, now
Yeah,
we
yeah,
go.
yeah.
Yeah,
Now you go to jail.
yeah,
And it is, and it's weird because what do you do? Do you know what I mean? It's like,
yeah.
and I don't think we are like the generation that can police it, because I didn't grow up in that environment. That
Well,
wasn't possible.
I think policing in general is going to be impossible. You have to culturally police it. This has
Yeah,
to be a cultural thing of like, as a 15-year-old, you don't send someone else a picture of yourself
yeah.
in that sense. I mean, it's there needs to be a cultural shift for that to be
So
implemented.
because
Um,
what I mean is, it's like when I was 15, right? So you're talking late 80s, right?
mhm.
You couldn't actually. There was no way to take a photograph of your girlfriend, because you'd have to take it to the local shop to get it developed.
Yeah,
So
let's get a Polaroid, but even then, like, you have to be there.
yeah, do you know what I mean? But that's what I mean.
Yeah,
If you had a Polaroid, but you wouldn't do that in case somebody found them.
yeah,
Do you know what I mean? So that things like that just wasn't going to happen. Because, like I said,
hmm
Polaroid, but somebody might find it. Oh, do you know what? We'll take it. We'll actually do it on a film. Well, where do you get it developed? And there'll be
yeah,
kids listening to this having no idea what to get a film developed means.
yeah.
Right?
But that's where
I
it's
mean,
interesting to see
if
how technology has blown up so much, and we're so behind.
yeah, well, I just had a weird thought then, right? If most teenagers, like 70s, 80s, and 90s, would have had a telephone
hmm
in the sitting room, the lounge, in the TV with the rest of the family, you couldn't even talk dirty to your girlfriend, and she couldn't talk dirty to
No,
you.
yeah,
It wasn't happening
yeah,
because there was an audience. So,
yeah.
like you said, that
I
culture
mean,
thing. It,
even then, if you had multiple lines, like you're
yeah,
on the phone in your room, you have the long cord saying something you maybe shouldn't, and your little brother, older brother,
yeah.
sister, whatever it is listening on the other line.
Mom, Martin just said.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
it's it's unfortunate because things have moved so fast that we are culturally unequipped to deal with them. And I mean, now there's countless studies coming out with how toxic social media and phones are for developing minds, how
yeah,
toxic and how toxic they are just for a developed mind, right? To a fully developed human, the phone is addictive. There's a syndrome now where it's like phantom vibrating syndrome or something, where you'll feel like your phone's vibrating
hmm
in your leg, but it's just your kind of brain playing a trick on you. Like, oh no, someone's trying to contact you. Like, no, they're not.
I had this thing several years ago. There was this girl that I was talking to a lot, and we were always sending each other messages, and then we kind of went our separate ways. And we weren't boyfriend and girlfriend or anything, but we just it's like there was this intensity where we was always just messaging each other all day. And then, like I said, we kind of things, we just went and did our own thing. But what I noticed is every time my phone pinged, I would be like, oh, it's so and so, and of course it would just be anything random.
Right.
And I just realised I had this weird addiction to the noise of my phone, and I
hmm
couldn't get rid of it. So ever since that, and we're talking like 5, 6 years ago, my phone is permanently silent unless somebody's trying to ring me. It doesn't
hmm
vibrate. It doesn't. No, I get no notifications about anything. I just have to pick up my phone to see if somebody sent me a message. I don't know if I've been because I just realised how addicted, in a
hmm
reactionary sense, I'd become to a ping on my phone, and I couldn't
Yeah.
control it. And funnily enough, we were talking about memes. I sent a meme to my friend, like a reel this morning. This guy was
hmm
having a rant. He was a stand-up comic, and he was having a rant, and he was like talking to this young person in the crowd. He's like, "You've no idea what it's like." He says, like, ever since phones have been out, he says, like, once upon a time, he said, I used to just go for a shit. He said, it's got to be at least 10 years since I've had a shit and not had my phone with me. He said, we used to just shit. That was it. There was nothing
Yep.
else to do. He said, and when I was a kid, he said, and you were on a bus, you just stared at the drips coming down the window. You had
Yeah.
nothing else to do You
Yeah,
just
you'd watch them race. Which one's gonna win?
yeah.
That whole thing.
And he just had this whole rant about it, and it's
Yeah.
just one of the funniest things because I was just like, "Damn, that's so true." There was
Hmm.
just boredom. It's been a lot. Something I've
Yeah.
spoken a lot about in the last few months on podcasts and in coaching and stuff.
Yeah.
That just I think one of the biggest things that's difference between us in generations is boredom because
Hmm.
you and I have discussed this before, but when we were kids, you would go and try and learn how to build an engine in a car because you had nothing else to do.
Hmm.
You would go and walk 2 hours because somebody said they'd seen a dead body or something, there was a car crash or
Yeah.
something because you had
Yeah.
nothing to do for the whole day. So walking 2 hours to go and
Yeah.
see a car wreck, whether
Yeah.
it existed or could have a rumor, and then walking back was something to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. It's I was gonna say Pavlov would love a word about that ping on your
Yeah,
phone,
yeah,
and
Pavlov's dogs, isn't it?
it's so true, and it's I think boredom is something that is so hard to instill
Mm,
in younger generation of like put everything away.
yeah,
And they like I feel like 30 years ago they would have been diagnosed with ADHD because there's a need to do stuff. There's a need to you said as you're on the bus watching the
yeah,
rain go down. I mean, there's I feel like times when I was a kid where I would watch them race, I just kind of
mm,
make up little stories about each one.
yeah.
It's like, oh, he's going really fast. It's like, just what do you come up with when you're bored and when you're not plopped in front of a screen with just vomited entertainment?
Yeah.
And it's reminds me of the old Roman thing of bread and circuses, where it's as much as these devices have helped us with connecting people. I never would have met you
No,
30
that's
years
it. Some
ago,
of the
right?
best
It's just something that
conversations I
happened.
have in a year
Um,
is talking to you
so
as we just, we just
yeah.
just let it all out and just
So
chat.
so it's great that these devices connect us, but at the
Mm,
same time, like there's a blade on the edge. There's it's not a dull sword. There's something that is cutting us, and if you're not aware of that, like you putting it on airplane mode, like this is going away. This is being silent.
yeah.
I need to be present for whatever it is I'm doing. Um,
I do that for every
that
single podcast, every single coaching session. It just goes on airplane mode because I don't want a flash. I don't want a ping.
oh yeah,
Even if somebody rings me,
yeah,
but it's
yeah.
interesting because when I went to that wedding a couple of weekends ago in Austria, I picked up a hire car because I flew into Munich because it was like 2 hours to the venue from Munich. It was just crossing the
Mm,
border and got in the car. I was like, oh yeah, great. The car, plugged my phone in, perfect, great. So I've got Google
mm,
Maps, but for whatever reason, the car was, you can use your phone or you can use the car infotainment system. And it's like, well,
mhm.
I need I need Google Maps to get to where I'm going because I need directions.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's fine. That was 2.5 hours in silence. No radio, no Spotify, no
huh.
podcasts, just me and the old-fashioned way of driving, just
Yeah,
talking shit to myself for 2.5
yeah.
hours. And of course, and luckily, it was only supposed to be about an hour and 50 minutes, but there was a good 40-minute delay because I was just stuck in
Hmm.
roadworks and traffic trying to go down motorway.
Hmm.
So I even got to like, oh great, I'm just bored now, staring at people who are like, why is this guy staring at me? Because I haven't seen or spoken to or heard anything, and it's entertaining to just stare because I'm stuck in traffic.
Yeah, yeah. I had a recent um, drive where I just remember I was really upset on the way back. I just had a conversation with myself.
Yeah,
And it's not, I don't need to find the right radio station, the right song. All right, I need to get my Spotify playlist up. It was like just parts of my head going back and forth about this thing I was upset about.
yeah,
And honestly, it was healing and cathartic because it let me work it out. And by the time I got home, like, I feel better. And then I started to think about all the people that have that, but they're not releasing it.
yeah,
And it's just pent up bitterness, anxiety, aggression, fear, all these things that, I mean, as a coach for you, like I'm sure you see it all the time of like you need to put things down and get it out.
Yeah, there's a few things that I notice more and more that I was having this conversation yesterday with my butcher as it goes, because I did this talking about something, and I was just like, yeah, but that's the fucking reality. And one of the biggest issues going sometimes is, as a coach, when I point out to somebody, the problem might be, well, politely putting it, the common denominator is you. So maybe you're the problem, not everybody else. And like people just don't like hearing that anymore. It's just like I'm not here to like, you've hired me to do a job, and that job is to listen to you and like, hey, how do we work this out? And we're 3 sessions in now, and you're still regurgitating the same bullshit. The problem is you. It's not society. And and sometimes you kind of, it doesn't get me much referral when I hit a client like that. But it's just like, look, you've been lied to your entire life. Yeah. The reason I say it like that, there was, I don't know if I've ever told you this, but in my 20s and late 20s, I got arrested and I'm an ex-offender and I nearly had to put it right. I ended up bankrupt.
Telling me that last time, I think.
Yeah, right. And there was a point after that, right, when I had to have a really like, what the hell's going on in your life? You're not thick, but Jesus Christ, you've been like a dickhead for a decade. If you look at it, and there was this kind of avenue of bullshit that I'd convinced myself of, where it wasn't my fault. And at some point, I just had to sit down and say, well, whose fault was it? And it was yours, David.
Yeah.
It's your fault. It doesn't, maybe that guy had mistreated you. You didn't have to react that way. That other people would have just walked away. Other people would have got another job. Other people would have just not had the fight. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, but you've, and I was guilty of justifying my action. And so I didn't have to accept responsibility for the way I had behaved in a situation. And when analysing that, I realised there was this pattern of behaviour that had just carried on probably from primary school, where I was always getting in trouble. I got kicked out of school, I got suspended, I got put on report. Do you know what I mean? My mum famously tells everybody that ever listens, she knew my secondary school as well as I did, because she was in there that many times just sorting stuff out for me. And there was a pattern of behaviour. And when I looked at that, it's just like, yeah, and it was always your fault, David, regardless of how you justified it. And I just realised I'd never understood what taking accountability was. For me, taking accountability was, you do the crime, you take the time. It was that simple. Do you know what I mean? It's just, if I get caught, I get caught. I know the consequences. And if getting caught in the consequences of that was getting suspended from school, well, that was fine. But that's not accountability. That's just being a dickhead. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You've been excluded. Nobody wants to teach you.
Yeah.
Parents don't want their kids hanging around with you. Yeah. And you're causing your own parents loads of shit and worry. And there's no accountability in that. You're just justifying, well, if I get into trouble, I get into trouble. I don't care. Right?
Yeah.
And it's just like, and when I'm coaching people, I sometimes see that same pattern of behaviour. And there's lots of things I can try and explain it away with, like not great leadership from my father. Okay. Lots of people didn't have that, still did fine in life. And the thing I zero it down to, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off because I knew you were about to say something. You're good. I was never honest about what I wanted to be in my life or wanted to do in my life. And because, like we were saying earlier, you've just got to take that moment. You've got to step through the door, So I never did that. And there's again, and you've got to be careful I don't shift responsibility. It would have been good if there was somebody in my life who guided me in that process. The closest adult male I had to me was my uncle, who'd been to prison twice. Right? So, and I knew there were things I wanted to do, but never took a step towards them out of fear, out of not knowing, and also not being honest about, actually, I would love to be in that play. Actually, I'd love to go to that English recital. But I'm the kid that gets suspended, so I don't do that. And the irony is, if I'd have knocked on that door and said to the teacher, look, this might come as a surprise, but I'd love to try out for the play, they'd have probably embraced me.
They would have been really skeptical, I'm sure, at first. Like, how are you going to screw it up for us? But
exactly.
If you goes back to when we were talking about like taking that chance and volunteering for something. But it also, I think, goes back to our original points about the Stoics. Is that one of the reasons I love the Stoics is they force you to look in the mirror. It says every issue in your world is your issue, no one else's. And I think the excuse, responsibility, whatever you want to call it, of you were saying, well, your father wasn't there. That works for a time.
Yeah.
But once you mature, that's an excuse that I'm sure your clients wouldn't want to hear this. That's the excuse a weak individual uses.
And that's the point.
Someone who is too afraid to pick up the responsibility themselves. They want someone else to do it for them. And it's, again, the Stoics, I love the idea of you are responsible for your life and how you react to it. So the guy who walks by and bumps you says, hey, look out, dickhead. Like, yeah, you could freak out and get in a fight, or you can kind of go back like, I don't know what their problem is, but it's not my problem. I just keep walking.
Well, it is, because on one hand, it'd be like, I'd been arrested, I ended up bankrupt, I'd been kicked. So people are like, this guy's not afraid of anything. I know, I was petrified. I was petrified of actually taking a chance on doing anything I wanted to do. And then, of course, as I got into my 30s, and I was looking like, well, if I wanted to achieve that, it's going to take this many years, I became afraid again, Yeah. And you just like, and eventually you just realize it's like, I mean, the podcast 4 or 5 years ago, that started from just, do you know what? You've got to stop being afraid of trying to do things that you want to try. So, and here we are, 140 odd episodes in.
Yeah. Well, that's the reason I finally published.
Yeah.
Is I was at a point where I had written the book, edited it, read it over and over and over to the point where it's, I think for any author, if they, phrase this delicately, if they're a author who is of quality, they are afraid to publish. And it's not me just trying to toot my own horn, but if you write something down and then throw it out there and you don't care how it's perceived, you really haven't thrown down your thoughts. And that's, I mean, I was terrified because the book really is so many parts of myself that I've put into it and vocalized and characterized, and the half-elf female character, that's a part of my psyche that I basically have put onto the page and lived through.
Yeah.
And now I've written the second and third book out of it, and it's a thing of, it's scary to see someone reading it. Yesterday, this caught me totally off guard. It's the second day of school. We just started. I have a freshman who I had last year in 8th grade in my Latin 2 class, and I sit down. He comes in, he sits down, and some students are starting to file in, and he picks up a book, opens it up, and it's mine.
Jeez.
And I go, holy shit. Like, where'd you get that? Because there are some adult things in there, and the 14, 15-year-old reading it could be a little iffy. But he's probably 6, 7, 8 chapters in by the look of where he's at on the page, and he's like, I got it on Amazon. I'm like, all right, well, I hope you enjoy it.
I remember
But it's the idea of him perceiving kind of very innermost thoughts that I have.
I remember the first time somebody told me they'd read my book, I was embarrassed. Because I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to think about it.
Yeah.
I didn't mind strangers buying the book, leaving a review which wasn't many of, to be fair. But
Yeah.
it's not like it solved many. But being faced when somebody I knew, and I wouldn't tell people I'd written a book because I got embarrassed. And I remember this one guy, he was a friend of a friend, and when he heard I'd read a book, he laughed about it. When I said I'd written a book, and he just laughed. I've never spoken to him since because I couldn't deal with it. Because I was in such a sensitive place about what it meant, because I really cared about the book. I really cared about what I'd written. The book was therapy in its own way. And to have somebody laugh at it who'd never read it, turns out never reads books. Do you know what I mean? It's just all of these things.
Yeah.
But I couldn't process that in an adult way. I just couldn't. And I was just why do I feel like I'm 13 trying to make sure the girl that I adore doesn't notice that I'm looking? Do you know what I mean? Even though we're in the same table and we're science partners, I'm still shitting myself to talk to her in case she realizes just how much I fancy her.
Yeah, it's deeply frightening, but also deeply freeing in a weird way of like, here I am. It's the emotional equivalent of if I just took off all my clothes and walked out in the middle of the street.
Yeah.
And
on a very
someone drives by like, what are you doing? It's like, here I am. Right? I feel like Kramer from Seinfeld almost.
I was like that with the podcast, and I noticed this year for the first time I started talking about the fact I have a podcast. If people are like, oh, what do you do? I'd add that to the things I do.
Yeah.
But for like 3-4 years, I'd just shied away from it. The same as shying away from that I'd written a book, and you just.
Yeah.
And then you always get that great friend who says, oh yeah, this is my friend David, he wrote a book. And you'd be like, shut the fuck up. What are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah. I thankfully have a couple of those. One of my jiu-jitsu coaches is that way. Absolute gem of a man. And he keeps saying like, well, you wrote a book, like, when are we going to see it? Bring it in. If I was you, I'd have 20 copies in my car that if anyone wants it, here you go. You can buy it on the spot.
Yeah.
And I finally actually pulled the trigger on that. I'm like, you know what? You're right. I am going to do that.
Yeah. Self-publicizing is really difficult. Going out there telling people how great you are.
Yeah.
This is how great I am. This is what I've achieved. And it feels so hard. I don't know a solution to get people to do it. But the thing I realized is if you look at the people that you love the energy of, they're all self-promoting.
Yeah.
In some form, they're self-promoting. And you're just like, damn. Oh, yeah. I've got to be like that. Because if I'm not like that, then nobody will be absorbed by the energy. Nobody will notice the energy in the room. Nobody, and it's a hard balance because on one hand, you don't want to turn up to him and say, hi, I'm Martin. Here's my book. Hi, Martin. It's
that's originally when we were emailing back and forth about what to talk about for this podcast. We mentioned like social media and advertising the book and all that stuff. And that to me is one of the hardest things is because to me, the word that comes to mind is narcissistic.
Yeah.
It comes across me entering like, hi, how you doing? I wrote a book. Here it is. I'm great. Goodbye. Right. And it's the self-promotion I have a hard time with. And I think part of that is because I have internalized that Claudius mentality that we talked about earlier of like, do I want to be the tall grass that gets cut? And, that student that is reading the book might come in and be like, this is the shittiest book I've ever read.
Yeah.
You're an awful author. I'm transferring out of your class. I no longer respect you.
Yeah.
And
I was going to fail you anyway.
Yeah. There's that. Yeah. You said like the 13-year-old part of my brain that wants to be like, oh God, do they approve? And I feel like as it's been out and as I continue writing more, that part gets quieter. And the part where it's, if you don't like it, you don't like it. I don't really care because I like it.
I realise I only realised this a few years ago. So when I was training to be a hypnotherapist, one of the first things I learned about was a thing called timeline therapy. And like learning the timeline therapy one weekend, and it was about another 18 months, I think, before I actually did my proper formal hypnosis training. We were doing this thing, and timeline therapy is effectively going back over emotions through time in your own life, and you and I'm going to paraphrase this quite badly, but effectively you get into a relaxed state. There's a group of us in the room. It's like a group hypnotherapy kind of guided meditation type thing, and you come out of your body, and it'll describe different ways because people can see timelines differently. It's very personal. Some people see it one way and some people see it in a line, and that's not how everybody sees it. But so anyway, I go down this line, and there's certain things that I see, and it's like, and you're looking at it as your adult self, as an observer, so you get kind of a better insight whilst experiencing the emotions of you at the time when that was happening. You kind of, all the memory comes back as if it was happening to you right now, but you're detached from it, so you have an objective view now. And I went back to this conversation. I would have been about 11 years old, and I'm talking to a guy called Stephen, and I'd forgotten that this kid Stephen even existed, and he was talking to me about a girlfriend I had in the summer holidays between primary school and secondary school, right? So you're talking like age 10 and 11, right, before you go to big school. And there's this girl called Sarah that was my girlfriend for like 4 or 5 weeks during the summer holidays. I'd forgotten that if you'd have asked me to list my girlfriend, she would not have been on the list, because I'd forgotten that all about her. And he is telling me that, because we went to different secondary schools, that she's been telling all the boys and all the girls at this school that I can't kiss, that I don't know how to kiss. And there's this like 11-year-old David who is, I've never realised I've ever felt that humiliated in my life. And I was just like for an 11-year-old, but that's how, I cannot explain in words how humiliated that 11-year-old felt. As an objective adult, I was just like, well, first off, you don't even know if Stephen's telling the truth. You don't go to that school. You don't even know if Stephen and Sarah talk to each other. You know absolutely nothing about this story at all. And the second thing that was just like, name me an 11-year-old that knows how to kiss. You learn to kiss when you're an adult, or the first time you've spent a proper time with somebody you're in a sexual relationship with, because what you learn is how they like to kiss. That's when you know you can kiss, because they always come back for more. But you don't learn that until you're kind of in adult relationships. Sexual relationships is when you learn how to kiss and the value of a kiss. So, but what I realised, because I would have been about 46, 47 or something, it's like every time I probably went to try and do something in my life, there was this humiliated 11-year-old that's like, this is how we're going to feel if they don't respond in the right way. And I was always having to, that was the first obstacle. And that was probably one of the biggest things that held me back about ever aggressively promoting myself in the book. It probably is what held me back from doing a podcast for so long, because there was just all these little things, and they all just stemmed to that kid who just, so every rejection from male, female, whatever, was that boy having a conversation with a guy called Stephen, who could have just been lying. About an event that, because what, you kissed a girl when you were 10.
Out behind the swings, and
well, the one kiss I remember was on the swings. It's the only kiss I remember.
I'm sure one of you ran off right away afterwards.
No, we were fairly composed. Actually, because now you say it, and the memory's like, actually, I remember we did a few kisses. I was obviously doing something right for a 10-year-old. But it was just the level of humiliation that I recalled in that moment. I was just like, oh, shit. I'm still that little boy when I'm going to do something that's important to me. That I feel unsure about that. I feel vulnerable. You know, if it deeply matters to me, like writing the book, I'm suddenly that little boy again. And you're just like, fuck.
Yeah, I have a very similar story regarding writing, oddly enough.
Okay.
That I think terrified me for years of actually putting the book out, because I was, I think, seventh grade, so around the same time, like 10, 11 years old. Um, and he's now my boss, oddly enough, nicest guy in the world, but he was my ancient history teacher. And he assigned an assignment that was just creative writing of something with ancient Greek mythology. So I was like, oh man, this is like totally freeing. I can write about Gorgons and Hercules or whatever. Like, I just made up my own little hero, and he had to climb an Olympus, and he met a witch, and there's just, I was just creative and excited. And he asked, it's like, does anyone want me to read their assignment? And I was like, oh, me. Like, I was so happy. Like, this is my writing. This is my idea.
My moment.
It's great. Yeah. And it's that moment of volunteering. I tried to step up to the plate, and he's reading through and he's doing great. And then he kind of stumbles on some like spell the witch says. And everyone in the class laughs. And it's an immediate like, oh, like just soul crushing. And I feel like even when I was in Germany doing like the preliminary drafts of what the book would be, just the ideas, there was that little seventh grade me saying like, they're all going to laugh at you again.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to laugh at you again. And it's that adult part that, like I said before, has to say, I don't really care. Because this is for me. The book, I think, is a story for me. And I would love it if other people enjoy it. I'd love it if people enjoy the series and the message it has behind it. But ultimately, this is for me.
What I learned, and this is what I credit the internet for, definitely one of the positives, is you realize if you watch enough stuff on the internet, you realize there is a group of people out there that if you literally saved it, if you were literally for, they would find something to take the piss out of you for. Do you know what I mean? Oh, yeah. Right? Do you know what I mean? It's just like, you're not going to please them. And then there's this group of people out there who will be like, do you know what? Well done. Fantastic for getting off your ass and achieving something, regardless of what level of success it has. Do you know how important it is to you, your soul, to your integrity as a person? And you would find a complete stranger who just tells you, like, I respect you so much. If I was in your neighborhood, I'd buy you a beer. You're the type of guy I want to be friends with, because you're somebody that's out there doing something, trying to make the world a better place in your own way, in your own community. You're trying to lay down ideas that might provoke thoughts or feelings, give some level of escapism or some enthusiasm or some excitement. And you just like, and I started leaning into those people, because they're the ones that say, and that person that tries to shit on it, tries to like be a fireman and piss all over your own fire, they don't have a fire to put out. They have nothing. Their life is so shallow, so hollow, so meaningless. The only thing they're interested in is the people that are shining a light that's brighter than theirs and chucking stones at the bulb to try and put it out. Because they've got no meaning, and they're just energy vampires who just suck the life out of you. And they're basically just fucking bottom feeders and oxygen stealers. And the world is a worse place with them. So that's my little motivational rant for anybody that has a dream. Right? You've got to find people that just tell you, like, do you know what? Like you say, you know, write the books, because it's the best thing you'll ever do for yourself. And it's a body of work that's a collection of ideas that are put into a format that explore everything you've ever pondered, through characters, about integrity, about courage, about humanity, the good, the bad, the way that we can make our own mistakes, wallow in our own self-pity, and the journeys that you have to travel through to get over those obstacles. And it brings a depth and meaning not only to you as a person, because when you write, you can't help but explore it And as you start to explore those things, you start to realize the horrors in your own life that you don't like. And then you write them down. And you write, sometimes you're writing down what you should have done better but didn't. And other times you're writing down what you did do right. And actually, in a way, you're almost laying down a page of, I'm proud of myself for doing that. And I should be. Because when you detach from yourself and put it into a character, you allow the reader to experience why they should be proud of that character, and why they should give the person who didn't achieve what they should have. And it's almost like a cathartic method for doing it for yourself. And then having, having the courage to put it on paper so everyone else can see, oh, look, here's a book of demons. Let's have a little dig into this and see which way they go. Because there's a book, there's a bit in my book where, and I didn't realize at the time that actually that's what I was writing. But I called it, they are demons, but I didn't realize why I wrote that chapter about demons and how if you they feed off the energy of you as a personality. So, no idea. And I was just like, oh yeah, that's your own demons, isn't it? And you're actually literally describing the ones that grew really strong off your behaviours and the patterns. But it was only years later I realised what I'd written down and the depth of meaning behind it. And there's me worrying about it's really shallow, and people are like, it's a really deep book, that, isn't it? And I think it's really shallow. And it, and I don't. Yeah. But and
there's some funny things that'll happen. I mean, so the series itself is multi-perspective. It's following several different characters over a long time frame, whole new world. And so there's a lot to keep track of. And every now and then something will line up really well thematically that I didn't plan. I plan a lot of stuff, but every now and then I'm like, wait a minute, that worked out like better than anyone could have planned.
And it does. It's something in your subconscious that lays it out for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if it's the Joseph Campbell hero's journey type thing where it's just an innate human condition that just kind of comes out on the page. And that's, oddly enough, that's actually where the title of the book kind of came from, and then evolved even more in that sense of Children of the Dying Hearth is really each one of the characters. I didn't have the title down. I remember asking my mom after she read it, like, what do you think the title should be? It was just untitled for a while. And she's like, it feels like something to do with home. Like there's a home element for all of them. And then when I was talking to the publicist I was working with, he helped flesh things out even more of like, yeah, every single character really is just terrified of getting out of their comfort zone. They're all in their home. And they're like kids who say, it's warm here, it's nice here. I don't really want to leave, but life is pushing me to leave. And I actually know that's what will help me grow. Yeah. That's what will make me kind of metamorphosis into the thing I'm supposed to be.
Because it's that thing again, isn't it? Of just volunteering and stepping up.
Yeah.
It's weird how... Like I say that, like everything we've talked about, it's just come back to what we discussed at the beginning. It's regardless of what age you are, you have to just volunteer and step forward.
Yeah, and I mean back to the other point too. You may get cut by the lawnmower, but be aware that doesn't kill the grass.
It doesn't. It just rejuvenates it.
It helps it grow.
Yeah. It's there was a thing that I seen. Sorry, it happened to me. And again, it was one of those aha moments. And this was when I was learning hypnotherapy, and the teacher, a guy called Vinnie Jones, and I always credit him for pointing this out to me. So the great thing about Vinnie is he's very good at hiding what his skill set is. Because he's quite playful and he's quite an entertainer when he's doing his courses. But it hides just like how clever he is at what he does, and he can read micro expressions like they're magnified in front of you. And we'd done some exercise, and he's going around the group and he's giving feedback, and he gave me my feedback, and he turned to then just give it to the next person, and bear in mind it's open, do you know what I mean? It's not like we've been talking about things and stuff like that, and literally as he turns, he just swings back round and he just points at me And he said it's feedback, not criticism. And I was just like, ooh, because I'd gone into this place, and I realized again, I'd been doing this since I was a child. I just like, fuck. Do you know what I mean? I'm like 47, 48 years old, being given life lessons that I should have learned at school. And I could then, again, I could see all of these patterns of behavior where people had tried to give me feedback, and I'd taken it as criticism, and then taken it really deeply, really personally, become really aggressive in towards my attitude towards that person with future interactions and stuff like that. And it was just this one man, Vinny, just in a split second saw a micro expression and knew exactly where I was going, and just snapped me out of it and said, it's feedback, it's not criticism. And I was just like, and of course I then look at lots of interactions with men as I was trying to come up through, and you just like, took that as criticism. Yeah, maybe it was criticism. Maybe it was feedback. Maybe if you'd taken the criticism on board as feedback, you might have explored the outcome of it differently. Because sometimes people are being critical, but you can decide. Like you were saying earlier, that one of the things about Stoic philosophy is if somebody bumps into you, you don't have to have a fight with them. You can say, well, maybe you're having a bad day. I don't have to have a bad day. Maybe somebody is criticizing me. Maybe I can explore it as feedback. So, oh wow, there's so many roads I can go down with that one little eye opener.
One of my other favorite quotes is from Marcus Aurelius, one of the great Stoics, and he says, the severity of a thing isn't the actual thing itself; it's your measurement of it, and you have the power to take that away at any time. And it's straight to your point. I was going to bring it up, and then you did it already. Of even if someone is hypercritical of, say that student who reads my book, like, this is the worst book I've ever read. Yeah. I could sit there and, oh my God, be that 12-year-old just heartbroken in class again, wanting to go home and sit on the couch and play video games and never try anything ever again. Or I could sit there and say, why do you think that?
Yeah.
Like, I'm curious. Like, what did you not like? Just tell me. Yeah. And I can treat it as, even the harshest critic, you can treat it as feedback.
Because there's so
even then you can say, I'm not validating your feedback. I think it's terrible criticism.
Yeah. You could
maybe
discover
you didn't read closely enough.
He's never read a book before in his life.
Yeah. And so that whole again, I think the importance of keeping stoicism around, especially for anyone, which really then is everyone who wants to venture out and do something they haven't done. It's good to have that mentality of, people are going to shit on you.
Yeah.
Now, stoicism is the umbrella. Like, you can either walk around and be like, oh man, I'm just taking it from all sides, or you can kind of keep moving through it. And there's trying to remember what it was in the third book. So I'm reading it now as a first draft, doing some initial edits, and one of the characters makes a comment regarding the quality of individuals that have shown up to help out, and he basically says, "Oh, they're all shit," and the main character, Testador, says, "But even shit fertilizes a field."
Yeah,
and it's one of those things of like, would I want it thrown at my face? No, but you can use things that you would never want on you for very important purposes, like fertilizing a field.
But you start to realize the more you step outside that comfort zone and start doing the things you're afraid to do that you want to do, that the more you do that, you understand what people mean when they say everything is fuel. You can just decide which way you burn it, but you can use everything and anything as fuel to get you up in the morning, to motivate you. It can be because you love something, it can be because you hate it, it can be because you want to prove somebody right or prove somebody wrong. It doesn't matter. Whatever comes at you, like you say, you can decide the measure by which you beat yourself up on it. It's,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah. It also, and this is, I think, the weird thing. Jordan Peterson talks about this of when you take on that responsibility, it's like deeply invigorating. There's a very strange example since Cupid featured already on the podcast for a bit. As I mentioned, I had to basically go get some meds for him, and these, not to incriminate myself, but are not FDA approved.
Yeah.
So I had to go through basically back alley channels to get
Yeah.
some experimental medication that for many cases, it's like 90 some percent of cases, it works. It cures cats of this terminal illness that affects basically cats under one for the most part.
Yeah.
Um, and I remember feeling as I was driving out to get these medications, there wasn't a care, there wasn't a thought. It just felt very purposeful. It
Yeah.
was very, I joked with my wife afterwards. I said, this is the closest to John Wick I will probably ever feel.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, it was
Yeah.
I'm not worried about school. I'm not worried about my job. I'm not worried about the mortgage. I'm not worried about any bills. This is my responsibility. There is potentially a life I can save. There is purpose behind this and meaning. And it was a really weird moment of self-reflection in silence in the car of like, this feels good.
Yeah. It's weird, isn't
Which you don't really want to feel when you're feeling very distraught about like, oh, your pet might be dead in a week.
it? Yeah.
Unless you stick them with a needle every day, a couple times a day. It's like you don't want to feel good in that moment. But there was that kind of silver lining of I do feel invigorated by the responsibility that's placed upon me.
It's that's probably a good place to stop, actually. And that's me and Martin putting the world to rights. And it's interesting because we're just having, in some respects, a private conversation, but we're aware that obviously it's going to be a public conversation. And the necessity these days to self-police, I don't know. It's a strange time, but people have to be careful about what they say. It is what it is, I guess. Who knows which way it's going to go. So, as always, thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching. Thank you for the support. It's appreciated. And wherever you're from, whatever you believe, please do take care and be blessed. Thank you.